Okay, this is a foam plug which I use to drop the sinks off. The sinks can be dropped off on a board or they can be dropped off on this. It's got what potters refer to as a bucket head, so this allows that to quickly center on the wheel. And so this is what I'm going to drop the sink off with. And then I'm going to come around here under the die and I'm going to hold it up and I'm going to try to center it, and then I'm going to bring the air to the top die and then I'm going to drop it down, being careful not to bang it, and then I'm going to come around here and I'm going to set it on top. This is an aluminum section out of a caulking gun cartridge, and this happens to be a marine caulk that comes in an aluminum tube. Ordinarily these come in paper tubes. Well, it turns out that at about 12% shrinkage, this is size, so if I cut the hole with that this size will shrink to 1.5 inches, which is exactly the size you want for a standard 1 1/4 fixture. So this works quite well, just by happenstance that was the right diameter, and it makes a nice cutter. Okay, I'm using a Milwaukee heat gun here, and I'm drying the clay out a little. As it comes off the press, it's quite stiff. The clay going into the press is much stiffer than you would throw with. But then I altered this sink by throwing downward on the foam plug. And I made this sink about 3/4 of an inch deeper. And in the process of altering the sink, the clay actually softens up and thins out. So I'm using the heat gun to stiffen it up, because when I turn it over, if it's not stiff enough, it'll collapse and I'll lose my shape. So I'm running my left hand across it, and I can feel how dry it is. And I want to get it dry enough, but I don't want it too dry. So it's just sort of getting a sense of when to stop. And I keep the heat gun moving because I don't want to concentrate the heat. If I do, the piece can crack. And particularly I want to pay attention to this area in here, because that's the part that will be supporting all the weight from the rim above. So I'm going to keep the rim a little bit softer, and obviously the clay is moving, and the circumference is wider down here, and so I have to keep the heat gun more down here than I keep it up here, because the circumference is larger. I've got this on the bottom, and that prevents drying out right around the hole. And when I flip it over, you'll see why, because I have to change the angle on that hole. So I've got this dry now. I'm going to take this off. So this is still sort of soft because I had it covered up. And the reason is this. I'm going to take this now and I'm going to flip it over. And I'm going to use this, and this has some circular rings on it. I'm just going to roughly center that. It's not going to be perfectly centered. And then I'm going to pick this whole thing up, and I'm going to flip it over. And I'm going to set it temporarily here, and I'm going to take the bucket head off, and I'm going to put this head on. And this is a little awkward because I've got to register the pins. It would be better if I put a bucket head on the bottom of this, and it'd be simpler. So I'm using my hand to locate those pins, and now this is pinned and it's centered again. So now I can take this and I can literally take it out, and I've finished with that. And now I can look in at the hole and look in at the circular marks on the bottom, and I can use my hand and I can center that by just picking it up. Well, this is such that I want to increase the angle on that. So what I'm going to do, when I cut it with a wire, I actually cut it with a downward sloping angle. And now I can take this and use a rubber kidney tool. I've lowered that angle a little bit. And here I have another odd tool. This tool is made out of a piece of cork and with a cutter on the side of it. And I use this to make the bevel relief where the flange for your drain fits in. And so I've just made a quick thing, and I take this and I stick that right in the middle, and I rotate the wheel slowly, and then what I do is I cut out a section for that flange. And once I get it roughly cut, if I take that cork all the way to the bottom, it makes it very uniform. And then if I run it briefly backwards with the kick wheel, that smooths it up. And then I could take a little bit of water on it, and then I can radius the edge off. If I do this carefully, I'll keep the size hole that I made with this that will shrink to be 1.5 inches. And now what I want to do is just inspect the site to see if everything looks smooth and good.